Welcome to Embers of the Hearth. My name is Sam, and here, in the flicker between silence and smoke, the dead still speak. These are not bedtime stories. These are the cracked relics of older truths, buried under lichen, bone-damp earth, and centuries of forgetting. I gather them from the crypts of folklore, the dark hollows of myth, and breathe in their dust. What I return to you may be changed, but never softened. Some tales rot, others haunt, and some refuse to die. Tonight we turn our eyes to Cornwall's shadowed edge, to a land veiled in mist and morning, where cliffs gnash against the sea and moors weep in the rain. Here walks Tregeagle, soul-sick and howling, bound to tasks no man could ever finish. This is a tale of damnation, of pity, of the weight of guilt drawn across centuries, a legend soaked in stormlight and sealed with stone. And with that, we begin the tale in the shadow-drowned valleys of Cornwall, when church bells tolled hollow with false promises and mist concealed a multitude of sins. There lived a man whose name would one day be whispered only in the corners of taverns, between prayers and curses. Jan Tregeagle. He did not begin as a monster, as no man rightfully does. He was born of flesh and bone, of woman and weakness, but something in him was wrong from the first cry. A hollowness where others carried a soul, a hunger where moral men harboured restraint. His eyes reflected no light, even in childhood. They said the midwife who delivered him was found hanged before dawn, her mouth still whispering prayers. A steward to the wealthy Robarts family of Lanhydrock, Tregeagle's fingers stretched across the land like pale roots, draining life from both earth and tenant. The ledgers he kept bore two faces, one for his masters, another for his insatiable greed. With each falsified record, each forged deed, each dispossessed widow driven from ancestral home, the void within him yawned wider. His quill scratched across parchment like talons on bone. The ink, some claimed, ran darker than it should, as if drinking something from the page itself. Power clung to him as he rose. Magistrate, justice of the peace, master of the damned. From his seat of judgment he pronounced sentences that made hardened bailiffs turn away. Children caught stealing bread had their fingers removed, debtors vanished into prison pits and were never seen again. Women who spurned his advances found themselves facing impossible accusations. "Let God sort their souls," he would say, a smile playing beneath his eyes. "I deal only with their flesh." Each Sunday he occupied the foremost pew at St. Breock Church, dressed in finery purchased with embezzled gold, surrounded by a family that feared him more than they feared damnation. His wife, once as vibrant as mayflowers, withered beneath his shadow year by year, until she resembled a pressed autumn leaf, fragile, drained of colour, easily crushed. His children learned to breathe shallowly in his presence, to vanish into doorways and tapestries when his mood darkened. Peasants crossed themselves when his carriage passed, not in reverence, but in ward. But even as his earthly fortune swelled, something else accumulated in the hidden ledger of existence, a debt no mortal coin could settle. At night, alone in Tregeagle Manor, where no servant would remain after sunset, he began to hear them. Whispers coming from the chimney throat, scratching beneath the floorboards that, when torn up, revealed only dry earth. Faces pressing against window panes from impossible heights. They were coming to collect. Tregeagle knew what waited beyond death's threshold, not heaven's light nor purgatory's flames, but something hungrier, something patient. Terror seized him like a fever. He spent fortunes on indulgences. He built chapels with blood money, endowed monasteries with lands stolen from the same. He confessed sins in churches across Cornwall, but never all of them, and never fully. Some stains ran too deep for utterance. The Bishop of Exeter himself came to hear the dying magistrate's confessions, spending 3 full days sealed within Tregeagle's chambers. When the bishop emerged, his hair had turned white, and he refused all food and drink until death claimed him a fortnight later. Whatever he had heard had poisoned something essential within him. As consumption ravaged Tregeagle's lungs and turned his cough wet with corruption, desperation hollowed him further. He consulted grimoires smuggled from the continent at obscene cost. He summoned physicians who practiced arts the church had long forbidden. He paid village women versed in older faiths to bring him poultices and potions that reeked of grave soil and stranger things. Nothing slowed the rot. As his hair whitened and his hands trembled, as his shadow stretched longer each evening and his days grew shorter, Tregeagle understood mortal remedies would not suffice. On a moonless Samhain night, when the veil between worlds was worn thin as winding sheets, he journeyed to Dosmery Pool, that bottomless black mirror on Bodmin Moor, where the lost were said to wander. His carriage could take him only so far. The final mile he walked alone, leaning on a blackthorn staff carved with symbols that would give learned men nightmares. The pool lay still as a held breath, reflecting neither cloud nor star. Time itself seemed suspended above its waters, an inversion of eternity, dark and watchful. Here, the old woman had said, the veil was gossamer thin. There, kneeling on the reed-choked bank, Tregeagle called out in languages no church had ever taught him. The water did not ripple, it ceased. It became solid and black as obsidian, reflecting nothing, not even his own desperate face. From its depths rose no horned beast, no cloven-hoofed tempter, but a gentleman in fine clothes, the colour of old bruises, whose smile held too many teeth, none of them human. "I know why you've come, Jan Tregeagle," the figure said, voice like wet stone grinding. "Death terrifies those who've earned their damnation so thoroughly." "I want more time," Tregeagle gasped, pride abandoned with dignity. "More years, a way to cheat what waits." The figure laughed, a sound that scattered roosting birds for miles. "Time is not mine to give, but I can offer a wager your kind never refuses." He extended a hand, palm up. "Your soul, not now, but when I claim it, in exchange for a promise. No demon shall take you while the task I set remains unfinished." "What task?" Tregeagle asked, already reaching. The smile widened until it seemed to split the stranger's face. "You will empty Dosemary Pool. How? It's bottomless. With this." From within his coat, the stranger produced a limpet shell, perforated, fragile, pocked with holes no larger than pinpricks. It sat within his palm, grey and unremarkable, save for the faint glow that pulsed from within its walls. A heartbeat from something that had never lived. Tregeagle's breath faltered. "That's impossible." "Then eternal damnation is certain," the figure said, already beginning to sink back into the mirrored waters, "whereas my way, you might delay it indefinitely." Tregeagle lunged forward, seizing both the shell and the outstretched hand. "I accept." Lightning split the sky without thunder. The contract was sealed. At dawn, the locals found him sprawled unconscious at the edge of the pool, clutching the worthless shell, smiling in his sleep. They carried him home, whispering of madness, of punishment, of devils. 3 days later, Jan Tregeagle died in his bed, the limpet shell clutched to his chest, a rictus of triumph frozen on his face. But death, for him, was merely prologue. The courtroom in Bodmin stank of tallow and fear. A dispute over lands that Tregeagle had once managed, lands whose ownership now hung contested with documents bearing his signature as sole evidence. The case dragged on for months, with families who had worked the soil for generations facing destitution if the deeds proved false. "We require testimony," the judge proclaimed, wiping sweat from a brow creased with unease. "From the man himself." "He lies 7 years in consecrated ground," came the response, "beyond earthly courts." A murmur rippled through the gallery. 7 years since Tregeagle's burial, yet tales still circulated, of lights above his grave at midnight, of earth that would not settle, of sounds no human throat should make, emanating from beneath the stone. A man, his face hidden beneath a lowered hood, stepped forward from the shadows at the courtroom's edge. His voice carried the hollow echo of abandoned wells. "Not beyond summoning, Your Honour." The court fell silent as the hooded figure, a local conjurer whose name would be struck from all records after that night, placed black candles at compass points around the room. He withdrew a pouch of graveyard soil, a tarnished silver bell, and began to speak words that made the air itself recoil. The candle's flames turned vertical, blue-white and still as icicles. Frost formed on window glass despite the August heat. The great oak door to the courtroom, barred from within, began to rattle against its frame. Women clutched crucifixes to their breasts. Men reached for belt knives that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. The judge himself made as if to halt the proceedings, but found his tongue cleaved to the roof of his mouth, unwieldy and useless. Jan Tregeagle, the conjurer, intoned, not as summons, but command, by powers that predate your Christ, by names you fled in life, by rites of blood and bone and binding oath, appear and answer. The door splintered inward through it, though its bar remained intact. In the threshold stood what had once been Jan Tregeagle. His burial clothes hung in tatters from a frame grown impossibly gaunt. His skin, the colour of cave fungi, marbled with blackened veins visible beneath translucent flesh. But his eyes now held the reflected flames of regions no living soul should witness. Who calls me from my rest? The thing's voice grated like millstones, each word trailing grave mist that writhed on the floor like sentient smoke. The judge, ashen-faced, clutched his gavel as if it were a crucifix. This court requires your testimony, Tregeagle. Did you falsify these deeds? The revenant's gaze swept the courtroom, lingering on faces that had once shown deference. They were now contorted with revulsion. His lips peeled back from teeth grown long and sharp in death's embrace. Which deeds, Your Honour? I falsified so many. The revenant's laughter caused blood to weep from the ears of all present. Several in the gallery collapsed, their minds unable to process the sound. I forged the Roscarrock documents, changing boundaries that had stood for centuries. I altered the Penrose family grants to include lands never intended for them. I backdated the Killigrew claims to steal from orphans whose parents died of the plague. Enough, the judge cried, blood now trickling from his nose. You have answered. Return to your place. I cannot, Tregeagle hissed, taking a step forward. Floorboards blackened beneath his feet. You summoned without banishing wards. The way is open now. I am here. With each word, corruption spread visibly through the room. Wine turned to vinegar in cups. Inkwells bred maggots. Rats emerged from the walls only to die, writhing on the floor. Terror erupted. Men overturned benches, fleeing toward the rear exits. A woman screamed prayers that fell dead in the air. The conjurer alone stood unmoving, face still shadowed, voice unnaturally calm. There are powers greater than your return, Tregeagle, powers that bind even the damned. From beneath his cloak, the conjurer withdrew a Bible bound in pale leather no animal had ever provided, and began reciting not prayers, but binding words, constraint and compulsion woven into sacred text. Tregeagle howled as invisible chains encircled him, thrashing like a mad beast as the conjurer's words forced him to his knees. His form flickered between corpse and something older, something with too many angles and limbs that bent wrong. The air around him shimmered with heat that scorched the wooden rails. Hear the judgment of this higher court, the conjurer proclaimed. You are bound to your bargain, Jan Tregeagle. To Doesmerry Pool you shall go. With your limpet shell you shall labour. And should you ever cease, should you ever abandon your task, what waits shall claim you utterly. Tregeagle's scream shattered every window in Bodmin that night. Pregnant women miscarried, milk curdled in udders. Church bells rang of their own accord, though many cracked from the strain. As witnesses fled the courtroom, none saw the conjurer remove his hood, revealing eyes as devoid of light as the gentleman at Doesmerry Pool had possessed. None heard his final whisper to the bound spirit. The master grows impatient, Tregeagle. Better you labour for eternity than face what awaits below. Some bargains have brokers on both sides. They chained him to his task as the devil had designed. Each night, the revenant that had been Jan Tregeagle could be seen at Doesmerry's edge, skeletal frame bent double as he dipped his perforated shell into black waters. Each dip caught mere droplets. Each step to the shore lost half of those to gravity's pull. Each return to the mere began the futility anew. Shepherds keeping night watch on the moor gave the pool wide berth. Those who strayed too close reported a cold that penetrated beyond flesh, settling in the marrow like winter itself. Some claimed to hear Tregeagle muttering as he worked, not curses or pleas, but equations, endless calculations of volume and time, a mathematician's madness trying to quantify the infinite. Through winter gales that froze human breath to ice, through summer storms that split ancient oaks, he laboured without cease. The years stretched, generations passed, children grew old listening to his distant moans across the moor. Locals developed rituals around his presence, warding gestures when his name was mentioned, offerings left at crossroads near the pool, stories told to frighten wayward children into obedience. Be home before dark, or Tregeagle will use your skin for a new water bag. But even damnation finds its loopholes. One Samhain night, when the boundary between living and dead thinned to transparency, wild hounds began to bay across the moor, not mortal beasts, but the dandy dogs, the hellhounds of old Cornwall that hunted lingering souls. Their howls split the darkness like knives, echoing from stone circles and burial mounds older than memory. Monstrous forms with eyes like burning coal, breath that withered heather where it touched. They coursed across the moonlit expanse, driven by a huntsman whose antlered silhouette stood taller than any man. Tregeagle heard their approach with terror that transcended death. He knew their purpose. Their master had grown impatient. The hellhounds had come to collect what was owed. Abandoning his shell, the damned soul fled across moonlit heath, the hound's breath hot against what remained of his essence. Mile after mile of stunted gorse and treacherous bog passed beneath him as the pack gained ground. Their howls split reality itself, the veil between worlds rippling in their wake. Ahead loomed a roach rock, that granite outcropping where a chapel had been built to St. Michael. Holy ground, sanctuary. Tregeagle hurled himself toward it, spectral limbs clawing at consecrated stone, even as the lead hound's teeth closed on his trailing essence. Tregeagle's outstretched fingers touched the chapel wall. The beast's jaws snapped closed on emptiness as divine protection seared its muzzle. It recoiled with a yelp that caused nightmares for miles around. The hound's howls of rage echoed for days. They circled the rock, tireless, vengeful, but could not set paw on blessed ground. Their huntsman watched from the moor's edge, antlered head tilted in what might have been amusement, might have been calculation. Inside the chapel, the monk who kept its candles lit found himself with unwanted company. A thing of tattered burial clothes and eyes like burnt holes in reality, gibbering prayers in a voice that caused the communion wine to sour and the host to bleed. "Please," the thing begged between blasphemous utterances, "sanctuary." The monk, Thomas Bouvel by name, more pious than wise, heard its tale in horror. Each word from the revenant's lips caused the chapel's stone to groan in protest. Consecrated candles guttered no matter how often relit. The very air felt stretched thin, as if the mere presence of Tregeagle's damned soul threatened to tear the veil between worlds. "You abandoned your sentence," he admonished. "Your punishment is just." "The hounds," Tregeagle pleaded. "They wait to drag me down. Not to death, monk. To him." The way he spoke the word made clear it was no earthly or heavenly master he feared. The monk considered, then spoke with authority his youth belied. "I cannot absolve your bargain, but I can commute your sentence, a task still you must complete, but another one. Go to the shores of Padstow, make ropes of sand that will bind the devil himself when he comes for you. Hope, that cruelest of tortures that are damned, flickered in Tregeagle's hollow eyes. How do I reach the shore? The hounds?" The monk removed his silver crucifix from his neck. "Wear this. It will guard your passage. Once. After that, you are on your own." Draping the crucifix over the remnants of his spectral head, Tregeagle fled into the night. The dogs' howls fading behind him as they confronted the holy silver. Their huntsman watched him go, antlers silhouetted against the moon, a sound like distant laughter trailing on the wind. But a task of sand proved no more possible than one of water. And so it continued, century after century, impossible task after impossible task. When the sand ropes failed at Padstow, he was sent to sweep the beaches of all sand from Land's End to Hale, an instruction from the pariah of Bodmin, who found Tregeagle sheltering in the Priory's chapel during a winter storm that had nearly delivered him to the waiting hounds. He laboured with a broom of brittled twigs, sweeping furiously against incoming tides that erased each day's work. When Atlantic gales undid his efforts and nearly dragged him out to sea, where the hounds once again waited, swimming in the spray with eyes like phosphorescent buoys, another cleric bound him to drain Doziel Pool with a cracked and broken cowshell. Each new task brought fresh torments. Each sanctuary proved temporary. Local priests, fearing for their parishioners, as Tregeagle's howls of frustration drove men to madness and women to stillbirths, bound him to new labours whenever he appeared at their doors, begging refuge from his hunters. Reed-weaving baskets that would hold the ocean, draining marshes with a single broken blade, gathering fog with nets of gossamer. Always failing, always fleeing, always caught between devil's claim and divine constraint. Some tales claimed he found brief respite at the Church of Sithne, where a compassionate priest allowed him to cool his burning essence in the holy water font between nights of labour. Other stories whispered of a period spent counting grains of sand at Gwenvor Cove, where for 13 years no one dared walk the beach for fear of disturbing his endless tallying. The legend spread beyond Cornwall, carried by sailors and tinners, by merchants and pilgrims. In distant taverns, men spoke of the howling spirit of England's southwest, of the price of corruption made manifest. His name became shorthand for eternal punishment. He'll be at it longer than Tregeagle, they'd say of impossible tasks. Now, even in our age of reason and electric light, when the winter gales howl across Bodmin Moor, or when Atlantic storms batter Cornwall's coast, listen beyond the natural fury. There, beneath wind and wave, beneath rational explanation, a sound persists, a wailing neither fully human nor wholly other. It is Jan Tregeagle, still running from his judgment. The churches call it redemption through suffering. The old folk whisper otherwise, that some souls are beyond salvation, that his eternal torment serves as warning rather than cleansing. Some modern folklorists attempt to explain him as personification of Cornwall's harsh elements, the winter storms, the dangerous tide, the treacherous bogs that have claimed unwary travellers for millennia. Others see him in the echo of older myths, the wild hunt of pan-European folklore, the wandering damsels of pre-Christian belief. But on nights when the storm's voice sounds too much like words, when windows rattle without wind, and dogs refuse to leave their masters' sides, Cornish mothers still whisper to frightened children, "Hush now, it's only Tregeagle, crying for what he cannot have. It's only the damned man, searching for an end that never comes." And in manor houses built on stolen lands, in courtrooms where justice still falters, in banks where ledgers hide modern sins, sometimes, just sometimes, those who follow in Tregeagle's corrupt footsteps feel cold breath on their necks, a reminder that no bargain outwits eternity, that no deed escapes the final accounting, that some debts once incurred can never be repaid. At this point in our journey, with the wind still keening over the tors and the moor sinking back into the mist, I'll leave you with a final offering, a kind of reckoning, not an ending, but a cairn of thoughts placed along the path where memory falters. The tale that most know, if they know it at all, is starker, a sinner, a soul, a punishment that never ends. Tregeagle, the crooked magistrate, cursed to roam Cornwall until the end of days, a creature of wrath and consequence, a warning scrawled into the very landscape. But tales, like moorland trails, are never truly straight. They twist, they double back, they vanish in the fog. What drew me to Tregeagle was not his damnation, but his desperation, not the demons that hounded him, but the man who believed he could outwit death, the fear beneath the fraud, the arrogance of thinking justice could be gained, and the tragedy of discovering it couldn't. We often paint him as a figure of fear, but I found something else beneath the howling, a man unravelled, a soul stripped down to bone and breath, not evil, not innocent, just human, fatally so. And so I've stepped off the well-worn path and wandered into the shadows of the story, the marshy places where remorse seeps through the cracks, where myth and morality blur. I've listened for some of the quieter truths beneath the thunder, the ones that don't offer absolution, just understanding. This is not a tale of heroes, nor indeed a clean redemption. It is a story of consequence carried on the wind, of how a name can echo long after the mouth that spoke it is dust. So next time the fog comes in thick over the moor, and the pools shine dark and still, listen, for some voices are not finished speaking. They are just waiting for someone to hear them differently. Thank you for listening to Embers of the Hearth. Until next time, tread softly and leave no debt unpaid.